Well, good afternoon. We can do better than that. Good afternoon. Much better. First of all, thank you very much. I know it's been a busy 2 days, and you still have plenty to go this week. I know it's 5 p.m. Some of you are jet lagged and tired and probably PowerPoint overdose already, and we'll try to entertain you for the next 75 minutes. This is the Office 365 Groups Deep Dive. And today I've got the pleasure, both with two of my colleagues from Redmond, both representing two different engineering teams, both from an extensibility perspective and also from an admin perspective, to talk about this topic that is Office 365 Groups. So here's the agenda for the next 75 minutes. I wasn't too creative when I created the agenda, but I found this deep dive picture that pretty much captures it all. So here's the goal of this session, and let's be very clear, is hopefully all of you are administrators in some shape or forms, managing either SharePoint, Exchange, managing Office 365. And the goal of this session is to talk about what are we doing to make your life easier in terms of management, governance, and potentially extensibility, depending on what you need. Now, I want to stress that because this morning we did have an overview session at 9 a.m. that got recorded, and hopefully the recording will be available between the next day or so. So the agenda for the next 75 minutes is, again, we'll level set what is Office 365 Groups, and that'll be fairly brief. And then we're going to switch gear and really dive in. How did we build this functionality? What has been cooking in the Redmond kitchen for the past year or plus? Then, after we've again explained to you what is Office 365 Groups from a back-end perspective, we'll start going into probably what a lot of you are here for is how do you manage, how do you administer groups, whether it's using some of the administrative interface that we have or using good old PowerShell commandlets. And then we'll switch gear and talk about extensibility. We're super excited to be here because just last week at Build in San Francisco, we announced the beginning of the journey around an extensibility story with respect to Office 365 Groups. And again, in that section, we'll give you a glimpse of potentially what you can do to integrate groups with line of business application, whether it's a cloud-based or on-prem, whatever it is. And now I'll wrap up with a couple next steps that we want you guys to do when you get back to the office. So let's get started. Again, let me ask a question. How many of you were in the group's overview session this morning at 9 a.m.? Not everyone. Okay, great. For those of you who raised their hands, I apologize. There's going to be a little bit of repeat. But for everyone else, I think it's important to pause and explain what is Office 365 Groups. But before I do that, it's important to stress that mental model that we've been working on when we came about solving this problem. And again, I'm probably preaching to the choir that in our personal life, things have changed quite a bit. You saw Gurdeep yesterday mentioning an application called Tinder and swipe left at a keynote. You probably experienced, for some of you that watched a boxing game this past weekend, that, I don't know if you read the news, but a lot of people couldn't access. You could pay to watch that game on Saturday night. A lot of people couldn't get in, couldn't watch the game. So what happened is a lot of people started pulling their iPhone in Vegas, where the game was, and started broadcasting on Periscope, Meerkat, whatever, Skype, whatever video streaming, bypassing that business model that the sponsor for that game, that boxing match, put together. The idea is, in our personal life, things have changed quite a bit. We get those viral effects. We can do things pretty quickly with this beautiful device that we have in our back pocket, front pocket, wherever we have. And this is causing some disruption in the enterprise. Because again, think of what the example I gave you about that boxing game. You had sponsors that wanted to recoup their costs. They couldn't serve that massive demand that they had from all those users. So what happened is the users weren't patient, and they started figuring out their own way to watch the game, whether it was legitimate or not. So that's what we mean by the world has changed. And again, I'm going pretty fast because we talked about it also during the keynote. Now, to bring this closer to home from an IT perspective and from the enterprise, in the past, your role, if you're an IT professional in the room, used to be gatekeeper of, I'm the gatekeeper. What application do we provide our users, whether in marketing, sales, what portal, what messaging, what mail system do we provide to our users. This day and age, a lot of the time we think of IT as being groundskeeper. Another way to think about it is the marketing team or the sales team is going to say, this is my tool of choice to manage sales automation, or this is my tool of choice to do accounting, or this is my tool of choice to do internal comms. And then we're going to turn around to you and say, here you go. That's my tool of choice. You guys figure it out. You do the Active Directory sync. You set up SSO so it works on all my devices. So that's what we mean, that transition from being gatekeeper to groundskeeper. Things have changed quite a bit in the world of IT. So with that, that leads into, in terms of the disruption and the urgency for change, is obviously the habits or the way we work and get work done, whether it's you as a team in IT or some of the teams you support internally. Expectations of how people work have changed as evolution of what we experience in the personal life. I mean, to pause a little bit, I like to remind everyone, or at least for myself, Christophe in his personal life, with whatever device he's got, it's the same Christophe in the professional life. You know, it's the same individual. I just have a different set of tools, but it's the same person at the end. And my expectation, especially the younger generation, is the way I work and get work done or communicate in my personal life, over time, our expectation is I should expect similar tools in the work life. And you've seen some of that journey that we're doing. And that's the first pillar, what we mean by here, the rise of dynamic teams. The first pillar of our vision for team productivity is based on what we call modern collaboration. And again, the idea here is pretty much like in my personal life, I got a plethora of choices on how I can stay in touch with friends and connect with people. I probably have 5 apps on my favorite phone to do those things. I got choice. In this day and age, when I work, I should have choice on how I want to do conference calls or how I want to run a meeting. You saw Julia yesterday in the keynote. She was running a meeting on a very large screen. We bring OneNote, having gestures and bring different characters from Star Wars. The second pillar of what we call the rise of dynamic teams is around an intelligent fabric. And what we mean by that is, yes, it's great to have options on how people can communicate and collaborate in the enterprise, but at the end of the day, you expect some common backbone around all those applications. And we started delivering some of those things like Office Graph, things like Office 365 Group that we'll talk about. Think of those as those layers, that intelligent fabric that runs across 365 and beyond, as you'll see later. And then the third piece that makes up our vision for team collaboration in the future is what we call personalized insights. So yes, we've got different apps, and whether we're doing instant messaging, videos, collaborating on a document, collaborating over email, collaborating over social, but at the end of the day, we expect the tools and the technology to help us be a little smarter about what we do. How do we ensure that Christophe doesn't reinvent the wheel when he's writing specifications for a product? How do we expect our colleague in marketing that they leverage the marketing campaign or the beautiful product brochure that they used at an event a year ago instead of starting from scratch over and over? And think about what we're doing around that. Think about Delve or Clutter that we've started delivering to help you get smarter. And hopefully at the end of the day, the Uber goal is how do we give you time back so you can allocate that time either for personal stuff or other stuff you got to do at work. So again, I went pretty fast, and you'll see when you get the deck that there's a bunch of hidden slides. And if you want to watch the longer version of this discussion, feel free to watch the recording for that session that those of you couldn't make it that we did this morning. So let's switch gear. I've talked about kind of like the Uber vision of what we see for teams in the workplace going forward. How does this relate to Office 365 groups? And basically, think of Office 365 groups as that intelligent fabric, that layer, that at the end of the day, the goal is simple, is to help a common set of people work on the same business objectives. And yet, give people choice to use different tools to, again, whatever they're trying to build, products, marketing campaigns, sales, close a deal. The list goes on and on. With that, to give you a little more color, let's talk briefly of what is Office 365 Groups. And the first piece that is very, very important, and we'll be stressing that over and over during the session, is to break those application silos, mail, portal, social, and the list goes on and on. We had to create a single definition of a team. And that's what you're seeing on the left-hand side. You create a team, and we'll get back to that when I do a quick demo. There's only one definition. It's stored in Azure Active Directory. That team has a set of properties, obviously has a set of members, and that feeds into that layer that you're seeing in the middle. That is Office 365 Groups. Now that layer then lights up a set of experiences, which are those vertical lines that you're seeing on those diagrams. So think of an experience like modern conversation powered by Outlook Web App. Think of file share and sync delivered by OneDrive for Business. Think about meetings, video calls powered by Skype for Business. And guess what? Those are just a glimpse. There is more. You're seeing things like dynamic CRM. So it's not just single experiences, but a line of business app. And obviously, being Microsoft, the Dynamics team has been hard at work working with us to also integrate their stack with groups. And what you're seeing in the dotted lines is, yes, there is a roadmap, and we'll talk about that later on. And yes, things like Delve will also help discovering insights on what is the group that potentially I should join, what is a team maybe across the globe that potentially is working on a similar problem that probably we should join forces, so a little more agile. And another question we also get is Yammer. Yes, Yammer will leverage that single object defined in AAD that spans that layer. The beauty in this case is that from a Yammer perspective, it'll give me access to Skype, calendaring, OneNote, and more. And the ... the ellipse, which is the last box, is yes, there will be more. This is just the beginning of the journey. Now on the far right is what we're going to be talking about, which is, we'll give you a great way to manage and deliver value to your end users, but we're also going to give you the ability to take this a step further. Take this outside of Office 365, whether it's an on-prem line of business app, whether it's a cloud-based, whatever it is, whether you're going to pull or push, we're going to give you hooks to leverage Office 365 Groups. Okay. Enough talking. Let's give you a quick glimpse of some of the experiences that are available in Office 365 Groups. So hopefully the demo gods will be with me this afternoon, for those of you that attended our morning sessions. And again, I'll just give you a teaser just to level set thing. What you're looking at here is you're looking at Office 365. I'm in my favorite browser. I'm not running Spartan on this one, or Edge, sorry. But I'm in browser, and yes, this works across browser. And in this case, I'm just looking at my inbox, and in particular, I see an email that has been sent by one of my colleagues, Amit. And you can see it looks like a distribution list, and it's been sent to myself. And when I click on that Seattle Engineering, I got a set of properties associated with that object. Some of those properties are some of those experiences that I was talking about earlier. So yes, it's got an addressable, and you can see some of those experiences that I talked about that we started delivering. Yes, I've got modern conversations powered by Exchange Online. I got calendaring, so if we got key milestones that we need to work on, I'll show you the membership, and yes, we get files and more, such as notebooks, so whether we're doing ideations or taking meeting notes, we can get the best of our note-taking solution that is powered by OneNote. Now, in this scenario, my colleague sent me an email. I'm not part of this group, but it sure does look like an interesting team. I don't know what they're doing and what they're up to, and he's asking me to join a spec review, and it'd be interesting for me to get caught up very quickly of, I don't have this spec review in my calendar, and maybe I should quickly see when is that spec review. What you're looking at here is the calendar, in this case, in Outlook Online. The blue is my work calendar. and in green, you've got the calendar for that team. If I want to attend, for instance, the daily stand-up calendar, the daily stand-ups that engineering team has, I can easily either add the singular or the series, and in seconds, that meeting that was stored in that shared calendar for that team is going to be on my personal work calendar. And the beauty, to go a step further, the beauty is it doesn't matter what device I've got, whether it's an iPhone, a Windows Phone, or an Android. When I'm on the go, I got this in my favorite calendaring app. So it looks interesting. I've added this meeting so I don't miss a beat. And I'm just going to click join because, again, it looks like this team is up to something. I should stay up to date. And again, it's not just about conversation and events, but very quickly, I can also get caught up. What has this team been cooking? Have they been working on specifications? Have been working on whatever it is? And that's some of the documents you're seeing here. And last but not least, like I said, I can also see maybe I want to get up to date on all the sprint planning and, if they've used OneNote, whatever that team has been going up to in the past little while. Now, this morning, I just give you a glimpse on how I can get caught up on that team that one of my colleagues is asking me to work on. This morning, I also showed how you can get started in seconds to, again, support the needs of teams today. Yes, Groups is self-service. Yes, it's open by default. And as you've seen, I can get caught up on context very quickly. Now, with that, hopefully, we'll give you a quick overview of what you can use Groups for. Let's switch gear and let's dive into what's under the hood.
Test, test. Can you hear me? No? Okay, there we go. Hi, folks. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm super excited to be able to have a chat with you about the architecture behind Groups as well as the administration features that we have available. So just to set the context for this discussion, could I see a quick show of hands as to who in this room has ever heard of Azure Active Directory? Good. A second question, what I'm trying to do here is there's some sections we can cut out if we have some basic understanding. Who has heard of Forward Sync? Yes, okay. Okay, so I assume that most of you are here to understand the administrative capabilities that are available to you with Groups. As we thought about it, though, we realized that in order to fully understand the administration capabilities, you need to have a basic understanding of the Groups architecture. Why is this important to you? I'll give you an example. I'm a big fan of examples. We had an escalation come in recently. One of our customers had a tenant admin go to the tenant admin portal, and he created a group. Immediately after that, he raced to OneDrive for Business as fast as he possibly could, and he checked to see if the group was there. He didn't see it. And he panicked. He opened up an escalation to Microsoft that made it all the way to the product group. We scratched our heads and we looked at this thing for a long time thinking, this doesn't make sense, everything looks fine. Until after we dug into it for a while, we realized that he must have gone so fast that he beat Forward Sync. Now, I see from the response I got when I asked about Forward Sync, there's a lot of people here who don't know what that is. And this is a very, very basic idea that it was very easy to understand if we take a few minutes to discuss this. So I'm going to take a few minutes and talk about architecture. After this, we'll revisit this story about this escalation, and I hope you will understand a couple of things. First off, why it doesn't make sense to do that. Why you would not, when you create a group through the tenant admin portal, expect it to instantly appear in an end user experience. And second of all, why that is not a problem. Why you should not be concerned. And third, why your end users will never see that behavior. So with that, let's get started. There's a lot of information available about the architecture behind Office 365 Groups. It gets very complicated. In thinking about what would make the most sense for you, we boiled it down to 3 major topics that you need to understand to really empower you. Number 1, a single identity. Number 2, federated resources. And number 3, loose coupling between the services. Now, what we'll do is we'll talk about each one of these for just a few minutes, and then we will jump right into some examples of how these things come together in real groups workflows, so you can start to see and build a mental picture of how these things come together. So let's start with one identity. There is a single identity behind every O365 group stored in one place, Azure Active Directory. It is visible everywhere in Office 365. And it contains all the common properties that are found in the group. This could be anything from the alias to the display name, even the list of members for the group and the list of owners. Now, why is this important? Now, imagine a complex system with multiple services that each have independent identity management. Right off the bat, that's a nightmare. So what's our next step? We start getting the services to talk to each other. Now we have all kinds of problems, like who's the master, if you have two conflicting changes, who resolves it. If two people make a change, each one in a different surface, what does that mean? So when you get into this kind of architectural question, there's a whole category of problems that you can eliminate by simply choosing a single point of truth for the entire service. Now, after we looked carefully at the architectural options, we settled on this as our architecture. Every group has one identity. It's mastered in Azure Active Directory, and most importantly, all group management actions must go against this identity. You don't have local administration actions. Everything flows through to Azure Active Directory. And as a result of this, there's never any complex sync logic. Nothing ever gets out of sync. Somebody makes a change, there is a one-step process to propagate information in Azure Active Directory to all the services in Office 365, and this is forward sync. So if you look at this diagram, you can think of forward sync as those little arrows. When someone changes something in Azure Active Directory, that change needs to be broadcast to the individual services. Now, there's a lot of problems with having services try to stay up to date on their own, so we use forward sync. You can think of forward sync as a train that runs from Azure Active Directory to each one of the services in Office 365, and it never stops. Anytime there's a change in the master identity, forward sync carries that change information and pushes it into each service very quickly. As a result of this, architecturally, everything flows downstream from the Azure Active Directory. The only thing that actually goes into Azure Active Directory are changes directly from users or tenant admins. Again, we have eliminated an entire class of complexity by saying that forward sync is a one-directional dependency. The information flows from AAD to individual services. In addition to this, because the services don't have to worry about going and fetching fresh information, staying up to date, they know Azure Active Directory will come knocking through forward sync. If there's new information to be had, they can keep a local cache. And there's no complexity to it. So what you'll find is that in many of these workloads, it's very, very fast because all the information is stored locally within that service. As a result, if there's a change in Azure Active Directory, the change gets pushed down, and the services don't need to worry about this part of the puzzle. So that's one identity available everywhere, our first point. Our second point, our second point is federated resources. Groups use a model where each service can extend the group data set with data that is pertinent to the individual services. So in addition to the identity information that's available by default in Azure Active Directory, so take, for example, Exchange Online. Exchange Online creates a group mailbox. That's a tremendous amount of information and a lot of capabilities that Exchange adds to the group experience. That provides conversations as well as calendar services to the group. SharePoint Online extends the group data set using OneDrive for Business document management, which provides document storage, exploration, sharing, et cetera, as well as a OneNote notebook for all the group's note-taking needs. In addition to this, new workloads as they come in can follow the same model. And this is where it gets really important because, as you heard today, we just announced Dynamics CRM. Dynamic CRM became that third triangle. Dynamic CRM has its own data. And as a result of this model, when Dynamic CRM lit up in the groups suite, there was very little impact on any other part of the system. And this is very important to us because we have a lot of plans. We have a lot of very interesting things we'd like to do with groups. We have very good ideas about how we can enrich the collaboration experience across the scene. It's important that we have this architecture so that we can add services without disrupting existing experiences. An additional point here is that when a new service comes online, you don't have to worry about retrofitting existing groups to take advantage of the new service. As soon as the new service lights up, the identity definition is in Azure Active Directory. Forward sync brings everything down, and that new workload will provision all the necessary information for that group, and it will simply appear as if that new workload had always been there. In addition, this model makes it very easy for you to determine which SKUs are right for your users. Maybe your users don't use documents. There are tenants like that. It's using this model, an Exchange Online only setup will work for groups. The same is true for SharePoint. SharePoint Online only, maybe you just need documents. Not only can you choose the SKUs that are right for you, you can change them in the future. You can just add an existing service and everything will just work. It'll just light up like it's always been there. So that's our second point. Our third point is loosely coupled services. Our services are all independent. They do not depend on each other and can exist independently. But groups introduces a level of intelligence between them. The services communicate with each other. The services are aware of each other. But the services do not need each other. This allows us to greatly improve the user experience such that it doesn't feel like there's these segmented, totally independent services that aren't connected at all. A great example of that is the communication that happens between Exchange and SharePoint, all of which is optional. But for example, I'll use the creation notification. When someone creates a group in Exchange or SharePoint, there's a fast notification to the other service, which allows that service to prep in order to make sure that if the user very quickly goes to that other service, they will already see the group there. Forward sync as a notification infrastructure does potentially have a little bit of latency. This guarantees the end user never sees it. This is why that tenant admin didn't need to worry, because when he created the group through the tenant admin portal, what he didn't know is the tenant admin portal talks directly to AAD, Azure Active Directory. As such, the notification down to SharePoint Online may take on the order of seconds or in the worst case, a few minutes. If he jumped right there, he didn't see it yet, but if he had waited 30 seconds, he probably would have. And this is amazingly irrelevant because he's really worried about his end users. And because of our loosely coupled architecture, those services cooperate, and end users will never see that. Now, the good news is, even for tenant admins, we're fixing that. Okay, so that's, I know that's a lot of information. That's a quick overview. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go into a couple of examples and see how these pieces fit together. Obviously, that's way too much to process in one shot. So we'll take a look at how this manifests. So remember, 3 ideas. One identity, visible across Office 365. One single source of truth for the group. Number 2, federated resources. Each service can maintain its own data, which is an extension of the group's data set. And number 3, loose coupling. Even though these services are very resilient, very, very segmented, the end user experience is very consistent, very uniform, and seems like one end-to-end integrated experience across Office 365. Okay, so let's take a look at an example of this. I'll introduce Melissa. Do a quick time check. I'll introduce Melissa, who is an Outlook user. She is going to create a group which calls through Exchange Online. Now, when Exchange Online receives the request to create a group, the first thing it does is delegate to Azure Active Directory. This is very, very important per the first point in our contract of architecture. Azure Active Directory creates the new group, and there's your single source of truth. Next, Exchange Online creates a local copy of the group identity. It does this for a couple of reasons, including speed, as well as when services create local copies of the group that are registered for updates via forward sync, this acts as kind of a distributed cache and allows great performance and great resiliency. Every service that does this, if Azure Active Directory goes down, not saying it would, the end users would not necessarily even notice because there's local copies of all the information available in Exchange Online. So talking about point number 3, which is our loosely coupled architecture, once Exchange Online creates the local copy of the group, it immediately starts to provision a group mailbox. At the same time, it notifies SharePoint Online. It's kind of a hint. SharePoint Online doesn't need to act on this. It'll eventually be notified via forward sync. SharePoint Online then does the same thing Exchange just did. It creates a local copy of the group identity in its private Active Directory instance. Now, SharePoint Online, showing you kind of the flexibility of our architecture, chooses not to immediately provision the document library. This is a decision made to preserve quota. There's static overhead associated with document libraries, and the SharePoint Online team said, we're going to wait until somebody tries to use the document library, and then we're going to provision it really fast. But since the entire environment is set up, that's very easy, and that's very doable. So that's one example of how these pieces work together to form this architectural contract. Now let's take a look at what happens if someone tries to execute a member management action. Melissa, again, goes to add members to the group through Outlook. A message is sent to Exchange Online, which then immediately, again, as point number 1, delegates to Azure Active Directory. All management must go through Azure Active Directory. Now, there's different things that can happen in this flow, but let's ignore everything and say, what if Exchange Online stopped there? That's when forward sync kicks in. As soon as that update is made in Azure Active Directory, it kicks off a forward sync notification to push the new membership information to all the services. Within the forward sync SLA, all services now have this up-to-date, consistent copy of the group. For our third and final example in the architecture section before we move on to administration, let's talk about hybrid. This is a quick show of hands. How many people here are involved with tenants that have hybrid setups? I would call that the distinct majority. So I'll start off by saying that for most people, the experience of groups in the cloud is consistent for those services, whether that person has a mailbox in the cloud or on-prem. A properly configured on-premises hybrid configuration will sync user identities into the cloud. So every user in the on-prem system would have access to all the group resources, and using, for example, OneDrive for Business could easily access the document library regardless of where their mailbox is housed. Now, the one exception is mail. Exchange mail routing is a little bit more complicated, so let's take a look at what happens when we have a person who's added to a cloud group that is actually, that individual has their mailbox located in an on-premises system. So Melissa goes through that group creation process we just described, and then she adds Dan to the group. Dan is an on-prem member. As soon as Dan is added to the group, Dan is sent a welcome email. This introduces the group, gives him quick links to access different parts of the group, and basically just lets him know about the group's existence. Now, it's easy for the hybrid configuration to route the mail properly because as part of the hybrid configuration, Exchange Online is able to determine from Dan's email address that he is in an on-prem system, is able to locate the on-prem system, and route the email down through the on-prem system to Dan's personal mailbox. Okay, so it gets really interesting when we start talking about what happens when people interact with the group. Dan is auto-subscribed, which is terminology we use to say that instead of accessing emails in the group mailbox, Dan is elected to get a personal copy in his mailbox. This is done for anyone who is an on-premises user. They are auto-subscribed. And the reason for this is an on-prem user does not actually have access to the group mailbox in the same immersive way that a cloud user does. So Melissa decides to send a quick agenda for the next meeting to the group, and it deposits a copy of the message in the group mailbox. Okay. So Exchange Online sees that Dan is an on-prem user, and since he is auto-subscribed, it automatically generates a copy of the message and sends it down through the on-prem system. Dan receives a message in his personal inbox on premises. He doesn't have to do anything. Melissa doesn't have to do anything. Everything just works. All you have to do is add the person. Now, Dan decides to reply to this message, adding an entry in his local nickname cache, which makes it easy for him to address the group in the future by name. But let's talk about what would happen if he didn't do that. If Dan wanted to address the group directly, he would actually have to type the group's SMTP address in an email message. And that's because, well, a properly configured hybrid tenant by default copies identities from the on-prem system into the cloud. The reverse does not happen by default. But the good news is we have a technology which does precisely that. Actually, here we go. And it's something called AAD Connect. Now, if you configure AAD Connect in your tenant, what that will do is when the group is created, it will begin to sync identity information down to the on-premises system. The benefit here is that Dan will be able to discover the group in a gal search and also address it directly by name, whether or not he's responded to it before. One quick detail, that object that's synced down through AAD Connect is synced down as a DL. It does not bring down any information. It does not bring down any group experiences with it. Okay, so that's it for architecture. Hopefully you'll be able to get a little bit more insight into how these things work, and more importantly, you'll be able to get a lot more from other things that are coming in this session and in sessions tomorrow. The three things to remember: one identity, mastered in AAD, federated resources, each service extends the data itself, and a loosely coupled architecture makes everything consistent and behave across the board. Okay, with that, let's take a look at administration. We'll start off by looking at the admin center. In this section, we're going to focus mostly on demos. Our first bucket of administration features is available in the Office 365 Admin Center. And this is the user experience in the browser that gives you the ability to quickly and easily do all the things you need to do on a day-to-day basis. So give me one moment here while I switch this projector up. Okay. So to get to this experience, you just log into Office 365, click the icon to the top right, and select Admin. That will land you in this experience. All the groups-related functionality is located in the left nav under the Groups tab. Now, as you can see here, the first thing you'll see is a list which includes all of the groups in your tenant. It's easy to explore the groups in this way. You can just scroll right through and see what's going on. In addition, we also support search, which allows you to look for individual groups by name. In this case, I'll look for the sales team. Now, once you find the group that you're interested in, it's easy to manage the properties of the group. As you can see in the right-hand pane, we see details about the group. We see the name, we see the description, and you can easily edit those with one single dialog. Next, member management has a separate connected experience. As you can see here, just clicking members and owners allows me to go into a separate screen where I can see the members, edit the membership list, as well as add a member. Clicking on a member gives me the options to promote the person to an admin or remove admin status if they already have it, as well as to remove them from the group. I also have the ability to pivot this view based on members and admins or just admins only. We also have an experience for adding multiple members to the group simultaneously. This search box goes across your tenant looking at all users, so it's very easy to find people. You can add multiple people in one dialog. So I'll add 2 people here. I'm not actually going to add this because this tenant is being used for demos. And finally, the most important part is if you do run into a problem with a particular group, or if a group comes to the end of its life cycle, it's very easy to delete the group in one shot. All you have to do is find the group, and there's a single delete action in the right-hand detail pane. Okay, so that is the user experience that we have available for doing your simple day-to-day administration tasks. Somebody gets confused, they forgot what their group name is. You can look it up, super easy. You need to add a member to a group for whatever reason. Super easy, super fast. Now, what about power user scenarios? Well, let's look at, and hopefully my PowerShell session expired. Let's take a look at our PowerShell commandlet suite. Now, we had previously a set of commandlets which we had released, which were based entirely on actions against the Exchange mailbox. We have just released a new set of commandlets which function fully against Azure Active Directory. These commandlets are published in Exchange, but with them you can do everything against a group that you would if you were acting directly against Azure Active Directory. One moment here. So the first thing we'll take a look at, and this may take a second, is get unified group. You'll see that there's two sets of commandlets, star unified group and star unified group links, where there's get, set, add, remove variants of each. Get unified group will get a list of all the groups in your tenant. In addition, it will allow you to search for an individual group based on parameters. What I'm going to show you here is how easy it is to look up the list of groups in your tenant based on, without specifying any parameters. Okay, that's pretty ugly, so I'm going to format this for you. So with one command, you can easily get all the groups in your tenant. This is the root of any type of automation or scripting function to be able to get a list of groups based on criteria or get an individual group. Now, another thing that is very common is people really need some custom reporting. So let me show you how easy it is to build a custom report. A sister team of ours has made a really cool commandlet called export CSV. I would highly recommend you get very familiar with this commandlet. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pipe all the groups in my tenant into a CSV file, open it up in Excel. So let's call this all groups.csv. Once we do that, I'm going to start Excel. And you can see that there's quite a number of properties here. Let's format this as a table, just to make it easier to read. Increase the font size for you. There's quite a lot of interesting parameters here, or interesting columns of data here. Let's take a look at just a few. Managed by details. This shows the list of people who are administrators for every group. Notes showing the descriptions for every group. Alias, email address array, primary SMTP address. So now you have all this information in Excel. And you can build all kinds of reports based on this data. Now, I'm going to show you one I like to do. I want to know what the group creation trends are looking like in my tenant. I'm going to clean up one piece of data here before I do this. And let's insert a pivot chart. Now, it's as easy as just selecting the date created field, and then some unique column, let's say alias, if we can find it. And it's that easy. So with one command and just a few clicks, I'm able to see what group creation trends are looking like in my tenant. As you can see here, there was a huge spike right before Ignite. That's because this tenant is being used for demos in Ignite. I can learn a lot of things about the users in my tenant. For example, one of the things I learned from looking at this is that a lot of the people on my team waited to prepare their demos till right before Ignite. So there's a wealth of information available here. You can build all kinds of complex reports, especially if you have custom workflows. The data's there, the data's easy to get, it's easy to build these things. Actually, let me switch back here. Advance through a few slides here. So just a quick recap of commandlets. I know this is super important for a lot of people. I was talking to a nice lady on the bus yesterday who had quite a few problems with the group management store until she found out we have a full set of commandlets available for doing whatever kind of complex workflows you need. There is full orchestration with AAD. That means that every one of these commandlets executes against Azure Active Directory as its primary, meaning it impacts the entire group space. It's not just Exchange. These are Exchange commandlets, but they can be used to manage groups in general. Excuse me. The two buckets of commandlets are star unified group for managing the group identity and the single value properties, as well as star unified groups links. That's a special set for doing membership management, as well as membership management, owner management, and subscriber management. Actually, let's see, do we have enough time? I think we have enough time. I'm going to show you one more cool thing you can do here. I'm going to show you how easy it is to script a group through the lifecycle and populate it with a list of users that represent all the users in your tenant. So let's create a variable that has a list of all the users. It's as easy as calling get user. Oh, I'm sorry. Apologies. So I've created $users is a variable that contains all of the users in the tenant. I'm going to pipe this to, I'm going to select the name property, and I'm going to send it to a file and call it allUsers.txt. Now I'm going to go in there, and I'm going to edit this. Oops. Oops, wrong. Oops, wrong variable name. There we go. So super easy. Now the most important thing to understand here is not only is it this easy to get a total list of people in your tenant, but this could be any list pulled from anything. You could have Excel files that you pull identity data from. And it's just easy to take a list of users and transform it into a group. I'm going to get rid of a couple of people here. Don't want my manager in here. Take myself out. We have a couple of people doing demos that I will exclude as well. And maybe this list is too long, so I'll just get rid of that. Okay, so now we have a list of users. I'll load this back up. It's as easy as calling get content. Just to show you again, that's the list we just created. Now, with one command, I can populate the list of members in this group. And this is the star unified groups links. I pass the identity. Oh, actually, I need to create a group. Hold on one second. I'm getting ahead of myself. Group test. So we'll create a unified group called IT Pros. We'll set the alias to be something simple. You don't actually need to specify an alias. If you don't, one will be generated for you. Now, another thing to remember is we just looked at a very complex flow of things that happen in the provisioning process. All this happens fairly quickly, although at this point it looks like it's taking a bit of time. After we provision this group with one single command, I'll just go ahead and start typing it. We'll add all the members to this new group.
Is there a limitation on the number of members in the group?
There is. It's very high. I can get you that exact number after this session. Okay. Maybe we'll come back to that in a minute. I want to make sure that we get to naming policy. So in some cases, it may be necessary for you to exert some influence on how your end users create groups. And this may be something as simple as blocking the words that they use in order to, when they're creating a group, as well as the as potentially adding some information. For example, you may want groups to be created with the information appended to the end about which region that person is from. So that's easy to do. Going to the Exchange Admin Center, we've connected the existing DL policy for groups. So you can go in and use that existing policy, and it applies to groups as well now. In fact, if you have this configured for your groups, it will, or for a distribution list, it will apply to groups out of the box. So what this is going to do, our first component here, is it's going to add information to the front and the back, and I can select what. This little wizard will help me do this. I want to add, in parentheses, the name of the region where the person is. So I start off adding some static text, which is just going to be followed by the attribute which shows the country or region, and finally, just a closing parenthesis. Now, once that is saved, what that will do is every time someone creates a group, it's going to append the word, for in my case, it'll be United States to the end. So if I create a group called Sales Team, the name of my sales team will actually be Sales Team, parentheses, United States. That's very important if you're in large multinationals that have repetitive business units in different sub-organizations. A lot of times groups need to have affinity to that particular region. There's a variety of attributes that you can pull from, and the values are pulled from the creating user. Now, we are running a bit short on time, so I'm going to jump right into group creation restrictions. It's possible using OA mailbox policy to specify that specific users should not create groups. There are situations where this does make a lot of sense. For example, in K through 12, it's very common for some of our customers to want teachers to be able to create groups, but students not to be able to create groups. It's not, in general, a good idea to have students that are very young have the ability to do things like this. So it's as easy as creating a new OA mailbox policy. We'll call this one Disable Groups. Okay. Apologies for that. That created a policy and dumped out all the properties of it. Now we have to set the specific property which disables groups. Specify the identity, which we just created, disable groups. And then the property you want to set is group creation enabled. And we'll set that to false. Okay, so now oh, sorry. Mistyped this. So now I have a policy that I can assign to any particular user's mailbox, which will disable group creation for that person, and they won't even be able to see the entry point for creating. That's as easy as using setcast mailbox. I'll disable myself here. And you just set the OA mailbox policy parameter to our new policy. And with that, this particular user, which happens to be me, will not be able to see the group creation entry points. What you can see is on the left hand, that's what it looks like before the policy is assigned. On the right-hand side is what happens after the policy is assigned. I would demo that. Unfortunately, it takes a while to propagate. So as a quick recap, I have exactly 1 minute left. We have 3 major buckets of administrative tools. Number 1, a UX available in the O365 Admin Center that gives you quick and easy management for all your day-to-day tasks. 2, a full set of group management PowerShell commandlets, which allow you to do complex workflows and custom tasks which require automation. And third, we have 2 policy controls which allow you to influence how naming works in your tenant, as well as to restrict the particular individuals who are actually able to create groups. Okay, so we are running short on time, so with that, I will hand it right over to Venkat.
Thank you, Sam. Can you please? Hello, can you hear me? Yep, great. I've only got 45 more slides, so you should be fine. Now, hopefully, we can give you freedom in 15 minutes, and Christoph's really good at making sure we stick on time. So I'm going to talk about AP extensibility of the groups, and I think the main message I want you to take away from this is we have APIs and the ability for you to extend groups for your internal needs in the organization, or the opportunity to have a wide selection of applications out there from which you can pick which suit your needs is a key and integral part of the group's offering. And what I'm going to walk you through quickly in the next few minutes is what these APIs look like, and to give you a flavor of what is actually possible, so and to give you those options. Because as Christoph said, your users are coming with a lot of needs and their own apps. They want a specific way of doing things. We want to support that. We also want to make it possible that you can actually watch who's accessing what, which apps are being installed. And so we believe, and we want to make it very easy for developers to develop those apps so that you actually have a wide variety of applications out there to pick from. So with that, all of this fits into a overall platform we are developing where if a developer has an app, or you're writing an app for your organization, or you have a developer, corporate developer writing an app for your organization, they can pick what platform they want to offer it on. They can pick what choice of technology they want to use to implement. You could host it in Azure, we'd be thrilled. You could run it somewhere else, that's okay too. You can run it on premises. And underneath that, to make development really fast, you can also, we offer SDKs for various platforms, so you can use your favorite development tools. You could directly call a REST API. And what we, at the end, at the bottom of the core of the platform is industry standard open OAuth and OpenID support for authorization, and a set of REST APIs. And this becomes critical. The unified REST, the unified endpoint. It's really critical that because we've designed the service for scale and for flexibility to be decoupled for all the workloads, such as Exchange and SharePoint when we offer groups, it's very, very important that we offer one API layer which abstracts this complexity away from the developer, right? And so that they don't have to worry about which stuff resides in SharePoint, which stuff resides in Exchange, what resides somewhere else. And so that is done by offering this unified endpoint, which is in public preview today. And this is just the beginning. We've just started wiring up all the functionality. I'll give you a sense of what's there. And this is a journey. And what I'm asking, my ask of you folks is to give us feedback on these APIs and the apps you see being built on the API so that we can make it much better and much richer and work really great for you. So what you're seeing here is that bottommost layer from the last picture, which is the unified API. What we've done is we've given a single endpoint, and underneath the covers, there's a lot of entities which the app can access. Users, groups, both of these reside in AAD. Well, at least the identities reside in Azure Active Directory. Files, which is OneDrive for Business. Mail, calendar, contacts, which come from Exchange. Tasks, and Office Graph, which powers the Delve, which powers the Delve client. And of course, today we're going to talk about exactly what groups looks like. And as I said before, right, because Azure Active Directory has a bunch of different groups. You have security groups and other types of groups. It's very easy to go to this one endpoint. The endpoint is called graph.microsoft.com. And after that, you see the tag beta. That's because it's in public preview. And once we have gotten the feedback and we finalize the API, at that point, we'll promote it to a production namespace. My organization. This is a shortcut. You can either specify the organization explicitly, or that's a shortcut to say, for the authenticated user, just apply this to their tenant. And you can say, okay, give me all the groups, that's a /groups, but filter and only give me the unified groups. So don't give me the security groups and the other types of groups. So it's very easy to construct this query. And for management, it's really important for developers and people working on apps to be able to manage this, whether it's creating the group, adding members, or, for example, picking the enabling subscribe so that people can get emails to the inbox, not have to worry about where this information ultimately is mastered. And so we offer management, and of course we offer access to all the content, whether it's files, conversations, events, and whatever else is lit up. And what our goal is that as we light up new content and new types of management policies, etc., for groups, that all of this also comes with the REST API support. And therefore, whatever capabilities we have here and whatever we have learned as we built these experiences, some of which Sam and Christoph showed, we are pouring those learnings into shaping the APIs to make it possible for others to build apps as well. And so you would have a wide variety of choice. So what you would have to do to build an app is you register the app in Azure portal, and it could be native apps, it could be web apps, it could be single page apps. These are becoming pretty popular these days, especially for corporate development. I've talked to customers where they develop single page applications for internal users and native apps for external users. App permissions. With the app, if it's only, for example, you're just browsing groups, then read all permission is sufficient, which means that that app cannot do any writes. In general, the way we protect like the data from any exposure is any request will only return a response if both the app and the user have the permission to see that information, and that keeps things secure. If the app is actually making modifications, then you need group or read write all, and this is a big improvement over Exchange Web Services we've always offered, because in Exchange services, it's keys to the kingdom, right? It's complete total access to your mailbox, total access to groups, not here. We have learned from that. And the app gets a token using OAuth 2.flow, OpenID Connect. These are just industry standards which all developers are a lot of developers are familiar with. That gets you single sign-on. And this also means that if your development team is starting to hire developers because they want to develop apps on top of this, it's going to be very easy to find the talent because these skills are widely available in the market. That's the other thing we're aware of. And you start building the code. So some of the entities available for groups management, we give you groups, and you can do all kinds of operations: create, read, update, delete, some of which Sam just demoed using PowerShell, subscribe, unsubscribe, favorite, reset unseen count. This one we learned from our OI, from the building the experience in OI Outlook web app, because we want a user who's using these apps which are developed, and also people switch from between devices, people switch between clients. When they access the groups, we want it to be seamless. So in this case, if I have 5 unseen posts, that's what my app is telling me. I go look at the groups, I've seen these posts. The app has the ability to go reset that unseen count so that when you go next to OA or Outlook, it doesn't show 5 unseen posts, because that would be confusing to the user. So it's about a seamless transition. So that third-party app should feel just like it's part of, that it's a first-class experience, just like any other application we offer. Similarly, for users, we give you a way to do the join groups. And you can see it's very, very easy to construct the queries. In fact, most of the time in our team, when we want to validate this, we can just go to a browser, or we have these tools. You can just type the query and see what response you get back. So it's very convenient. So you can, for example, go to a tenant specifically and go get the groups, and you get the specific group by providing the ID, which is just the tenant ID in Azure Active Directory, and then you can perform actions on it. We give you conversations, threads which compose the conversations, posts which are in a thread, attachments, and it's up to the app. Some apps want to mimic the Outlook OI experience, so they want groups, and then they want to model the whole hierarchy. Some apps, like some developers, prefer just saying, I just want to do one level, threads and posts in it, and we make both possible. It's very easy to do both. So you can either go to conversations in a specific group, or you can go to the threads and reply. This is one more thing we learned. It's very inefficient for an app to say, give me the thread, then give me all the messages or all posts, and then I go to the latest post and reply. Instead, all they can just have to say, reply to the thread, and we make sure that the reply is actually happening to the latest post. So it's just ease of development. It makes it very easy. Again, with calendar, you can access the calendar, events, calendar view. It turns out there are 2 things which really complicate life when you're developing an app which is having calendars. One is time zone, the other is recurrence. Having to keep track of expanding a series is very, very complicated, dealing with the exceptions. So we give an action called calendar view. What that does is, if you want to paint a month view or a week view in an app, you can just say, I want to get the calendar view from this start date, beginning of May, till the end of May, and just give me everything. Like, don't tell me to expand anything. And we just give you a series of events, and there's paging, so you can just page through and just render the screen. So it's very efficient. So, and of course, content. You can manipulate files, you can manipulate folders, you can create new things, you can enumerate children. So pretty rich. And once again, you can notice that, and this is where one of the places where we work very closely across all the teams which contribute to groups. So the semantics for how you identify an artifact, how you represent a collection, how you make operations is all identical. So the developer would know no difference whether they're dealing with an exchange master data, SharePoint master data, something else, some other workload in the future. So here's some, I'm not going to go this line by line, but here's a bunch of queries, like sample queries for reference. You can look it up. But so one thing I did want to point out, there's a lot of operators which are offered by this thing called OData, which is the protocol all these REST APIs implement. So very easy, the semantics for select. You really want to only select the properties you want. Otherwise, if queries are inefficient, server will take a long time to process. Plus, you're sending all this data over the wire, especially with the mobile app, you're wasting a lot of bandwidth. So you can use select, order by just so that we do the sorting for you. You can ask for top 5. You can use our inbuilt paging functionality. And once again, irrespective of which workload has the data, the semantics are exactly one and the same. So with that, I'm going to switch over to the demo. So I'm going to get this out of the way. Okay. So the users, we are API guys, so our demos don't have such cool names. You can clearly see that some engineer typed in a bunch of names in a hurry. But that's an OVA user's mailbox, but there are 2 groups. And I'm going to use these 2 groups to demo what I'm about to show you. And so this user has a happy group and unified groups. And now I'm going to take, I said it's very easy to play with these REST requests. So I have this third party. It's just a console. You can go set it up for free. And then on the left-hand side, you will see the request I'm executing. On the right-hand side, you'll see the response. And I'm just going to do a few examples quickly. And then, so let's get started. Also notice that I've already logged in here with the authentication. So this is using OAuth for authorization. So let's say that, there's a whole ton of things. Number one, you can get schema for the API. This is something developers want to do so that they can see what entities are one second. Let me just authenticate again. No worries. Yep. Okay. Now the user is authenticated. And so I'm going to go just get something called metadata, which is, if those of you who've used SOAP APIs, it's like a WSDL. And so what happens is we actually return the entire schema, enumerations, property, all the complex types, entities. And the power of this is we actually have an open source tool available. And what you can do is we offer a lot of client libraries, but if you use a runtime for which we don't offer a client library, you can use this open source tool pointed at this metadata file, and we will spit out a client library for you in that runtime. So it's very powerful. So that's one. And then you can also say, let's see, I have a bunch of canned queries here which I wanted to show. So let's say that we wanted to get all the unified groups for this org. So beta, my organization, groups, just give me group type equals unified. And so I'm going to send this. And you can see this was a very simple query. The bearer token, that is the OAuth token actually. And on the right hand side, we got the responses. So I think there's several groups in there. And you get a bunch of properties here. And you can use select to get exactly which properties you need. Similarly, you can get a users join group. So I'm going to try that. In this case, you can see there is me/join groups, because the join groups is a property of the user. It's not a property of the tenant, right? Different people have joined different groups. And in the case of John Doe, which is the user we just used, you can see that that person is a member of 2 groups. And it's not, these APIs, you can also do things. For example, I'm going to go subscribe the user for mail so that they get all the, automatically get notified in mail for the happy group. So all you have to do is pick the group, specify the ID, and then just do subscribe by mail. It's a custom action. We have tried to make the actions very intuitive, so it's very easy to learn. So I got back a success. So now let's go back to the OVA client, and I'm going to just switch back here. And notice that the user got subscribed, because now it has an unsubscribe action. So it's quite instantaneous. So it's really convenient that way. And we make sure that the state or the experience of the user is consistent if the switch back and forth. Have a couple more minutes? Yeah? 1 minute, that should be enough. Okay. And similarly, you can get conversations. So you can see this is starting to fetch the data. Once again, conversations have a lot of different properties. You can get group, you can get events. So in this case, and with events, we return a pretty rich property set: the attendees, the time zone, start, end, whether it's a series or not, whether it's an all-day event, and who the organizer is, etc. And finally, you can also get files. So here's an example of a file. Great. So you can see that all the files in the directory. And the type of apps you can build, even, this is an example of an app one of our colleagues built. This is using AngularJS, completely non-Microsoft technology. So AngularJS, and it's a single-page app. And so you can see here, I'm already signed in. And so so you can see messages. You can get the group, and you can see that I have 2 groups available. I'm going to pick the happy group, and I can pick. Right? You can view all the posts. You can reply back. So you can see that this was quick. Very quickly, we could put together an app which is used leveraging those same APIs. And once again, when you take actions from this, like I showed with the APIs, the state and Outlook and OI and any other client is consistent for the user. So they can switch between all these different applications, and the experience is still great. So with that, I'm going to hand off to Christoph. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Venkat. Okay, hopefully we're giving you a bang for the buck. Let's wrap up and let's talk a little bit about roadmap. So again, as we've discussed this morning, there's a number of other experiences we're going to deliver with groups. We're going to give you a mobile app. Yes, it's going to integrate with Outlook 16. Yes, we're going to have additional things such as Dynamics CRM that we just shipped. Yes, it'll be part of the Office Graph on Dell, so you can discover groups. In the center, yes, we care about security and compliance, whether you need data loss prevention, whether you need e-discovery, or whether you need additional insights on that circadian rhythm of what people are doing with groups, so that, again, you're a step ahead of your users and you quickly get a report of what is Christoph's been up to in marketing. And last but not least, yes, it's a journey on extensibility. We're super excited to announce a set of API, but wait, we're not going to stop there, and that's what you're seeing in the last bucket. Now, just to wrap up again and talk about those groups building blocks, we've talked about a single identity, define and manage in Azure AD. You can manage it with PowerShell commandlets, as Sam showed you. You can be doing REST API, as Venkat showed you. That lights up Office 365 groups, so it's part of our what we call intelligent fabric, and it lights up a set of experiences. I want to pause about a questions we've been getting either on Twitter this week or before, which is, how about Yammer? And let me repeat the answer I've been giving to all of you. Yes, Yammer will leverage Office 365 groups. Yes, Yammer will leverage that single definition that is in Azure AD, that is a set of properties, a set of members, whether it's open or private, whatever you want. The beauty of that is once Yammer is wired into groups, it'll light up some of those experiences into Yammer that we don't have today. Think about calendaring. Think of beautiful modern note-taking powered by OneNote. Think about other things we haven't disclosed. Use your imagination. But again, I want to be very clear that roadmap was just for 2015. Is there going to be a 2016? Yes. And we're going to continue to invest beyond that. So while I can't share a date today, I want to be crystal clear. Yes, Yammer will be a hero experiences along some of those other experiences we've delivered as part of Office 365 groups. With that, plenty of other content this week. In particular, tomorrow is definitely 2 back-to-back deeper dive around groups, one specifically around SharePoint and files, and then after that, around Exchange, again, with respect to groups. Yes, we got communities. Yes, we'll get different channels where we collect feedback and listen to some of your questions. And yes, we'll be at the booth all week showing you more demos. We got, again, a whole track around extensibility. that is listed there, and tons of things to ramp up on some of those key announcements we made at Build last week. So let's wrap up. Again, I told you the goal in this session is to get you fired up as administrators. Hopefully you got a whirlwind of PowerShell and REST API. I see a lot of people left. Maybe I didn't set expectations. Maybe we should have bumped the level a little bit. But hopefully you got a glimpse that we're here to make your life easier. We're here to make you great groundskeeper and enable the businesses to use whatever tool they want to collaborate and get work done. We're here to make you that hero that you can see in the upper right corner. So again, for all of you that haven't experienced groups, sign up for Office 365. For those of you that are already a foot in the cloud, use it, test it. And then last but not least, give us feedback. Give us feedback on API. Give us feedback on administration, naming policies, and you name it. With that, thank you very much for your time, and enjoy the rest of the week at Microsoft Ignite.